All right, friends, welcome back. Today we're talking about one of the most significant alignments of 2025, which is between Jupiter in Cancer and Saturn in the sign of Pisces at 25 degrees. But before moving on, I want us to actually take in a deep breath and let the significance of this trine between these two planets sink in for a second. And I say that because this is actually a very rare alignment. Firstly, Jupiter and Saturn alignments don't appear randomly. They appear in a series. We usually get 2 or 3 alignments, exact alignments, in a span of 12 to 18 months. Then there's a long silence, where there's sometimes 6 years to even 13-year gap between them before they get into a kind of a dialogue with each other. And this rhythm comes from their 19-year Sedonic dance, the same rhythm that defines their famous conjunction, as we saw in the sign of Capricorn a few years back, right before COVID and during COVID. They actually come to define individual and collective turning points in our personal biographies and in history itself. So when these two planets form a trine, especially in a water sign as they are right now, it's marking a chapter that doesn't repeat that often. And if you think about it, the last time Jupiter was in Cancer and Saturn was in the sign of Pisces was over half a century ago. And the next one will not occur until the mid-2080s. So this is big. And it also means that this kind of a trine that they're formulating is once in a lifetime for most of us. So we're getting an alignment between the planet of faith and expansion to the planet of limitation and negation. And both of them are moving through 2 of the most receptive signs of the zodiac, both emotional and introspective because of their water elements. And it's really important to remember that we're talking about a Jupiter that's exalted and Saturn is in Jupiter's sign of Pisces. And Jupiter in Cancer is talking about Jupiter's highest degree of generosity and goodness. And when we bring them together right now, we're talking about the intersection between faith meeting reality, where hope and vision are meeting endurance, tolerance, and where our emotional truth really have to find some sort of a structure. And we're going to see that again with the grand water trine that's coming up between Pisces, Cancer, and Scorpio. And what makes this trine even more extraordinary is that in the traditional planetary rulership and friendships, Saturn and Jupiter are actually friends, oddly enough, even though they seem to be totally opposite of each other. And that's because the relationship is one of mutual respect. The last 2 planets of the solar system are saying something about them being seasoned, mature, wise. So they can have or they can establish an understanding between them. Like Jupiter is going to offer us wisdom, and then Saturn offers us a particular kind of boundaries which allows us to have structure with real life applications. So we can talk about embodied wisdom as an example. And let me just give you a quick rundown of the dates. So because it's not like these 2 planets just meet for a day, they're slow moving planets. So the trine actually began formulating around October 14th. And this aspect between them will eventually dissolve by December 15th. And another thing to keep in mind, when this trine began in October, Saturn was already in its retrograde, so it was more inward, reflective, on things that haven't found their closure yet. And Jupiter at that time was direct. Then on November 11th, Jupiter stations retrograde, while Saturn will start to go direct on November 28th. So you can see that they swapped their direction and their motion. It's almost like the cosmic pendulum suddenly swings because Jupiter, the planet of faith, starts to go inwards, while Saturn, the planet of discipline, limitations, and boundaries, starts to move forward, which means the ways that we were trying to expand with Jupiter, now we have to go through a review process of that, especially in the nakshatra of Punarvasu. I have videos about the nakshatra of Punarvasu. If you guys are interested, you can check it out, which has a lot to do with redoing things and redoing things with the things that we already have in our life. How do we recreate from the primary ingredients of our life? So a lot of Jupiter's focus is actually on this kind of a process now through its retrograde. And as I was just saying, this trine story just continues and turns into a grand water trine with the transit of the sun through the sign of Scorpio and that Mercury Cazimi, which is the next video coming up. And if you guys are interested to see those videos, please do subscribe so you get a notification from YouTube. And before getting into the heart of this video, I'll just give you a quick outline of what I'm going to be talking about and the video's timestamp so you guys can feel free to jump back and forth. So we're going to start with the significance of Jupiter in Cancer in its exalted form. Then we'll look at Saturn in Pisces. And lastly, we'll look at this trine between them and see what kind of dialogue they're trying to have and what does that mean in our experiential realm. So let us start with Jupiter in the sign of Cancer. First thing to remember, Jupiter represents positivity, like the plus sign. It's adding, it's augmentative, it's expanding, is about growth, evolution, generosity, and it's our moral compass is the way that we're able to direct ourselves to what is good and true. And when Jupiter entered the sign of Cancer, it entered the domain that's related to our private lives, our inner lives, such as our emotions, our inner landscape, what we need as nurturance, what makes us feel like we have a sense of belonging. And when we say Jupiter is exalted here, and we're talking about the great benefic, we're talking about the purest and the highest expression of benevolence. And I know everyone wants to look at Jupiter and say, dude, I haven't won the lottery ticket. Good things, big good things they just haven't happened yet. But honestly, Jupiter in Cancer is about expanding our inner wisdom, expanding our inner worlds, making it more rich. It's about taking deeper roots within ourselves. And that's what allows us over time to set our roots into different facets of our lives. We have to start from within. You know, that song by Michael Jackson, Man in the Mirror. We have to look at ourselves first. And Jupiter is allowing us to do that. Jupiter in Cancer, that kind of growth that it's talking about is not talking about external achievements. It's talking about care. And care has a lot of depth if we actually think about what care is. When Jupiter also goes into Cancer, faith is not something abstract. It becomes about self-trust, to trust our internal happenings. It's given us the ability to understand what it means to trust love, what it means to have safety, to coexist with other people with truth. So Jupiter in Cancer becomes a guardian of emotional truth. It also expands our capacity to feel deeply. It's letting us actually make sense of the parts of our story that doesn't make sense to us. That's what we call trauma, right? So having Jupiter in Cancer is allowing us to work through these inner components of ourselves. It's also giving a lot of us we all have a philosophy of life, even if we don't realize it, even if it feels too fragmented and disorganized to qualify as a kind of a philosophy, we do have it. And Jupiter in the sign of Cancer is allowing us to embody it, to test it, to live it, to expand its wisdom. And it's really this kind of understanding in the long haul of life that gives us emotional maturity. And to have emotional maturity is to know how to regulate your own internal world, not to constantly have it depend on the external world. This is a kind of a liberation. And the sign of Cancer is a moksha sign. It is about liberation. So this is an aspect of it, a blessing that Jupiter is bringing here. So in many respects, Jupiter is expanding our emotional intelligence. And part of that is our ability to hold contradictory emotions, internal feelings, with compassion, with a moral compass that works. Because sometimes we perceive ourselves as kind, and all we need is that external trigger to drop that standard. The compass starts spinning around itself, and we don't actually apply our own standard. Jupiter right now is reminding us what those things are and how to stay aligned. And one of the things that Jupiter is doing here is teaching us the lessons of devotion. And I was saying the idea of care, the word care, it's actually a very heavy word. To care for someone actually requires a lot of sacrifices. And you need to be very wise to know why you care for certain things, because that allows you to see what you actually need to sacrifice to stay devoted, one directional, one pointed towards that thing that you claim to love. So Jupiter is permitting us to understand all these very deep and essential facets of what it means to be human. Now, let's quickly go over Saturn in Pisces. And please remember, I have a number of videos about both Saturn in Pisces and Jupiter in Cancer. I'll put the links in the description box below if you want to get into more depth about what these placements in themselves mean to understand the trine dynamic right now. But on to Saturn in Pisces. Firstly, we have to remember Saturn is the planet of bounds, boundaries, limitations, time, and of course, reality, good old reality. And Saturn's traversing through Jupiter's sign of Pisces, which is a sign about depth, introspection, incorporation of knowledge into one body of knowledge. And it has a lot to do with figuring things out, having insight through intuition. And it's a watery sign, right? And we have the planet of hardness and discipline in a very flexible and a fluid sign. So this is generally not an easy placement for Saturn. Like Pisces dissolves boundaries. Saturn's constantly trying to set boundaries and maintain them. So there's an inherent contradiction and tension here. And yet, when we get Saturn in Pisces, this is where we learn some of our greatest spiritual lessons. Because Saturn in Pisces is where realism encounters the invisible makeup of the real. It's something like the discipline of a monk. They're very disciplined human beings. They wake up at 3 a.m. to do their meditation. They have this entire ritualistic set of actions that they do through the day. It can also be like the inner structure of the artists. Externally, they might seem like there's just madness in their creation, but there's a method to the madness. Because Saturn's constantly asking us to bring form to the formless in the sign of Pisces. It's how we give shape into intuition. It's how we ground imagination. It's the way that we're able to actually make our emotional depth functional, because Saturn's injecting some objectivity and rationality into things. It's allowing us to get a little bit of distance from the canvas so we can actually see the whole picture, rather than constantly merging inside the image and not actually understanding it. And this is coming, this trine, it's perfecting towards the end of Saturn's cycle in the sign of Pisces. So it's showing us that it's time for completion of something. We can look at this as a final audit before Saturn leaves this oceanic realm and goes into the fiery sign of Aries. So everything unresolved, every emotional boundary that's been blurred or projected, every illusion that we try to hold on to it with dear life must now come to the surface for its final resolution. Saturn's not coming back for another 28 years. So we gotta wrap certain things up. And because Saturn not only goes direct, it's going direct soon. It's also going to ingress into the next sign. It's saying something about a pivot point where we're going from introspection and imagining it to the process of manifestation. So this wrapping up is taking us towards that direction. So what's been gestating in silence has to start to understand how it can take its form and shape now. Amorphous dreams have to start to solidify now. But we have to remember, we're talking about Saturn, and Saturn's always going to be Saturn. And Saturn in Pisces is going to teach us some degree of harsh humility before we get enough mastery to be able to have this expression, to set things into motion. And a lot of this, because of this trine with Jupiter, especially too, the first step is to trust the process. Right now, we're going through a phase where we have to endure by faith, and we cannot get through this time by force. Water signs are receptive. They're not forceful. So for those people who are, let's say, religious, this is a moment where what's constantly coming into mind is like, I have to trust God. For if you're more secular, I have to trust life. And we all have to trust ourselves in going through the eye of the needle from that water sign to that fire sign of Aries that wants to ignite, initiate, and come into the world. But the metaphysics of what's trying to become manifest, what's underneath it, is going through a massive metamorphosis, and this trine is saying something about that. To make it more practical, we can imagine Saturn here bringing some sense of realism to our emotional realm. We can imagine Saturn asking, how do you stay consistent in an impermanent world, in the world of flux and fluidity that's constantly changing? I'll come back to this. But let's now bring these two planets together first and to see what is the synthesis between Jupiter and Saturn as a trine. And I do want to say this, I'm going to make a series of videos just talking about different aspects, and hopefully I'll start recording those very soon. But let's get to the synthesis of this trine. And let's start like this. When we have Jupiter and Saturn in a trine, it's almost like having the expansive and the restrictive holding hands. It's the merging of optimism and realism. It's bringing the concept of hope and discipline together. And in water signs, because they're both in a water sign, and because it's a trine, we're talking about these two planets taking their own nature and trying to create emotional coherence. So it becomes about internal growth that's sustainable because it's rooted in the depth of emotion and is rooted in emotional truth. We're talking about emotions that are disciplined. We're talking about understanding the rationale or the rationality behind emotions. And when we do that, that's how we actually get compassion, right? If someone does something wrong, I can look at that person and say, you're evil because you did that wrong thing. But now if I start examining what led up to this person permitting themselves to do that, thinking it's okay to do that, what compelled them to do that? And that requires a lot of introspection. And from that, when there is an understanding, then we have compassion. So this aspect of emotional discipline is talking about how we can arrive to being compassionate, whether it's towards other people or towards ourselves, which is often needed. A lot of times we're a lot more kind to other people than we are to ourselves. So Jupiter is opening the inner world to our eyes, and Saturn is rationally defining what it is that we're experiencing in that interiority. And together, they represent growth with integrity, growth that leads to maturity, not a cancerous kind of growth that's just chaotic, I'm just going to do it because I can. No, you understand why you're doing it, and you're even understanding why you can, which that usually brings a sense of gratitude in life. For instance, when we have these two planets in a dialogue, we're understanding what it means to have faith, but what it also means that once when you have faith, effort has to go into things. Middle Easterns, we have a saying, you trust God, but you tie your camel's leg. So you can't just have faith without work or effort. And this kind of a trine, Saturn represents hard work. So it's showing us how do we trust, but then trust itself is not enough. We have to do the work. So it's making it easier for us to actually build something. And because we're understanding the depth of things, to build things that are going to be lasting and enduring in life. This kind of a trine brings a lot of congruence between what's internal and what's external. There's a lot of struggles to be able to do that because you have to understand so much. You have to grow, mature, become wise. But once when you are, your outer world is an extension of your inner world and vice versa. So again, both of these planets are not talking about our external success. They're talking about how much it takes to have internal alignment. And to be frank with you, it's easier to achieve things externally than to have an internal self that is aligned. Because once when the insides work out, nothing on the outside can break you. So it's really about making the outer life reflect your inner truth. And then let's quickly talk about that swap of direction that I was explaining earlier, how the retrograde goes to direct and the direct goes to retrograde with these two planets. Because by the time this video comes out, Saturn's stationing to go direct and Jupiter has started his retrograde motion. And since Jupiter is the one who's in retrograde motion, it's almost as if the universe is asking us right now, or it's saying, reassess your beliefs so you can realistically work towards things that truly matter to you. It's saying to us, revisit your faith so your reality can correspond and align to it. Like the moment is actually, even though this is a trine and it's supposed to be benefic, Jupiter is a benefic, it's exalted. Wherever we're misaligned right now, life is actually quite unforgiving because we're being pushed to create these alignments. There's an opportunity to create these alignments. And talking about opportunities, I just want to very briefly bring this in because this is going to be a separate video. But there has been a constant trine for the past month from the sign of Scorpio to Pisces and Cancer. Like Mars has already gone through. Mercury went through once, is going to come back to go again in a second time and formulate that Kazemi with the sun, which is going to be trining these other two water signs. And then Venus is going to do the same thing. So pretty much all the planet other than Saturn and Jupiter have gone through Scorpio. So Scorpio in this act between Saturn and Jupiter has been a catalyst, and it's giving more emotional depth to what's happening in those two other places. Like Mars brought a lot of intensity into this process that we're going through to be able to understand. Mercury brought awareness and is going to bring even greater awareness with that Cazimi with the sun. And Venus is going to finally bring reconciliation to the process when she arrives. So if you think about it, these three water signs are creating a circuit for healing. It's for integration, for renewal. It's increasing our depth. And having Venus as the last planet to go through, it's saying something about giving us a sense of inner coherence. It's almost like this is a setup for these internal alignments to happen. Trying not to knock over the mic. For these internal alignments to happen, because we're being recalibrated for something else to come forward. And we know that both Neptune and Saturn are going to go into a new sign. Long term, we know Uranus is eventually going to go into a sign. Long term. So things are being set up. It's almost like we're stepping into a new time, new space time. And our old internal configuration couldn't survive that new situation that's ahead. And even though right now is not easy for a lot of us, we're going to see the benefit of this moment. As they say, hindsight 2020. You know, because when I look at my own life, there's been times where I'm going through a stretch of hell and I don't even understand why it's happening. It doesn't make sense. It literally feels like there's some aspect of existence and the universe that is grimy and it's cruel. But then through that hardship, I can also see myself changing, but I'm not giving it enough credit. And then when it's all said and done, and then I find myself into a new situation in life, I have the right patterns. I can implement its routines. I can show up every day. But I'm only able to do that because I went through that deep emotional work and so much of it was painful. So this trine could have this kind of a feeling right now. We can really say that they're increasing our internal depth. They're teaching us how to stabilize our emotional realm. They're teaching us how to heal the fracture that might exist between faith and reason, between hope and practicality, between lofty dreams and practical everyday matters. And these two planets together in a water sign, as I've already mentioned, they bring tremendous amount of emotional maturity. And part of that is to, for instance, understand that compassion also requires boundaries, which is what Saturn's saying to Jupiter. And then Jupiter's turning to Saturn and saying, look, buddy, your cold, hard reality requires a heart. So in a lot of ways, we're talking about theory and practice, finding a middle ground. And I must be honest with you guys, ever since this trine started to formulate in my own chart, everyone will experience this differently. It has been very intense. And one of the reasons for that is that I have Saturn in the sign of Cancer, right? So yes, Jupiter and Cancer are in the same sign, and then it's getting that aspect from Saturn. But there's been this kind of intensity, urgency to see certain things and to be able to understand them with some depth, with some maturity. So it's pushing my limits. That's what I'm trying to say. And I'd be really interested to hear how you guys are experiencing this in your chart, because it matters when you have a planet in one of these signs. So I'd love to hear you guys' experience. And in closing this video, if you do like this channel, please do like, comment, subscribe. And I want you to know this channel is slowly growing. Yes, because I'm making the content, but it's because of your participation. So I just want you to know how grateful I am for you guys who listen and engage. It means a lot. And if you guys want your own chart reading to get to the depth of your own placements, you can go to the description box below. I have an email there, or you can go to parisayazi.com for more information. And I'll leave you with this. This is my wish for all of us. May we grow with wisdom, build with faith, and truly feel the grace of something bigger than life guiding our life. And when this trine returns 80 years from now, may this world find a world that is wiser and more mature because of the care and attention we gave it today. That's it for today. Sending you much love. Till next time.